Hey folks, welcome to ADSR. I'm Stephen Ellisted. Make sure you subscribe to the ADSR YouTube channel and follow on social media for great production content. So in this first look tutorial, I wanted to take a look at a new plugin I just came across the other day called Mix Checker by Audified. And when I saw this, I was really just kind of intrigued. So when we're mixing in professional studios, you're often going to see multiple sets of monitors. They let the engineer kind of find what it's going to sound like in different environments. It can be a really useful way of finding the best average mix for your song instead of just what sounds amazing on those studio speakers. The concept on this plugin, and it was developed because this company tends to work a lot with television production and other types of media production where things are constantly being heard in different environments. This literally just gives you a way to kind of simulate the average sound of a whole bunch of very common listening environments. So I went ahead and picked it up. I put it through its paces. In my studio here, I do have a pair of Tenoys and a pair of Genelec, and also a pair of Auratones, and I use those when I'm checking. The Genelecs are the nice, very accurate speakers, and the Tenoys are pretty decent as well, but they tend to be a little hyped in the low end. I use the Auratones to really check the mid-range. It's a classic crappy speaker that is very uniformly crappy and kind of represents the average of all the kind of crappy speakers out there in the world. And in the 70s and 80s, Auratones were the go-to in the studio for checking your mix on something that was not going to reproduce. If it sounded good there, it sounds great everywhere. So the plugin itself is pretty straightforward. We just go ahead and insert it right on our mix. We have just some very simple basic controls. It's so simple, it's not even an actual manual. We have first our compensation section up top and a bypass. And then we have a number of different speaker types. And so first I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off, bypass it, and let you hear a couple of seconds of this track and just give you a sense of what's happening here. This is a track called Because Somewhere by Eidolon. And I'm actually using this for the Creative Automation and Logic course. Happened to stop and film this in the way. So here we go. This is just a rough mix here, but it definitely gives you a sense of what's happening as far as like the richness and the breadth of it. It's not a final mix, but it's definitely, it's somewhere in the direction of being done anyway. Let me unbypass this, and we're going to go ahead and we'll start with our studio speaker. So we have a bunch of different emulations here, and I'm going to keep the compensation off. What happens is you have one of these selected, and that gives the basic matched profile of that type of speaker system, and then we can kind of compensate, especially for the studio or the Auratone model. You know, if it had a 5-inch cone, if it had an 8-inch cone, or if it was on, say, closed back studio head. But we'll keep that off for right now. So this is how this mix supposedly sounds on your classic studio speakers. I think we definitely lost some low end there, but it's a fairly balanced frequency response aside from that. And we can actually try to compensate by hearing on a 5-inch speaker here. And here's 8. And we can definitely notice the frequency response, the tonal profile changes as we shift there from each of the different. So I think I should point out here, they've actually modeled these speakers, and they talk about it on their website a little bit, by going into very, very highly accurate scoring stages and bringing in very classic examples of these different types of systems. And then they created a frequency response and did an EQ match to match that curve, so that this is a representation of a typical, but not every studio speaker, but it's going to be in the ballpark. And that's the general principle here. Let's hear this on the Auratones because it's a totally different one, and we'll turn this compensation section off entirely. And so again, I use Auratones in the studio because they give you kind of an aggressive, barky mid-range. That's great for kind of clearing up some of those nasty mids in your mix. If you're still hearing some bass and you're still hearing some pleasant high end on an Auratone mix, you know that you've got it dialed in pretty well. Here's a simulation of this. And let's see what that sounds like. So as we listen to that, we notice definitely we've lost some of that low end. If I compare, come back over here. right, so we can definitely hear a difference. But if I maybe come in and try to compensate for that lack of low end and boost it up, put a channel EQ on top of that, now I can compensate and try to bring that low end up to where I want it to be. Turn that off. That sounds a little overly hyped when it's in bypass, but when I compare it here, we can hear that where before there was a big difference between that Auratone and that studio speaker, now they're pretty close. We've managed to find a degree of compensation that suited both types of emulations. And that's really the key to this plugin, I believe, is really finding the EQ curve that gives you the least variation across, changes in between them. Because of course it's going to sound better on your studio system running through a balanced room and great speakers, but you can get it average across all these different match EQs that are very unforgiving. You're going to find a happy medium. When I work as a mastering engineer, that's a really important thing for me to keep in, is that I'm not trying to get the absolute best sounding possible version of the song in my studio. I'm trying to get the version of the song that has the most the most power, the most magic, the most energy, the best vibe that on any of these different systems, because we don't know, we have no control over where the music's going to be played, where it's going to be heard or experienced. When we think about mastering, and mastering a part of the distribution and the commercial side of the process, that makes a lot of sense, because the manufacturer, the record label, wants to make sure that it's going to sound the same everywhere. And if you think about the classic records, the classic songs, that's very true. Your brain compensates when you hear it on a little tiny Bluetooth speaker versus a big home stereo system, but it still sounds the same. There's nothing really jumping out at you as super different. And so I think that's really the key, understanding that process and then kind of finding these happy medium balances gives us a good sense of what's going on. So now let's see that difference between the Auratone and the studio headphones. These on-ear headphones are closed back. They have a hyped bass. So I can tell right there that I'd probably maybe want to compensate for that in some way. Maybe go to a steeper bump here and then pull this down, something like that. It's still a little hype, but it's better than it was across the average. And so we can keep doing this. And if we know that our music is going to most likely be consumed in a particular environment, then this might be a good way to start. So we have our smartphone. And the tablet with a slightly bigger set of speakers. So here we have our laptop speakers. And again, these seem excessively hyped in that particular characteristic of each one's sound, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think that it's going to force you to, aim for a very happy medium. We have some other ones. We have our car audio, and we always do the car test to check our mixes. Cars are very interesting because they're a totally enclosed environment with some, acoustic dampening to prevent the outside road sounds from coming in. And at the same time, our speakers are usually coming from left and right across the body of the car instead of coming at us like a normal stereo system. A little different environment. So we can see that. So we have a couple of ones. We have our TV. One thing I'll note, the headphones in particular, the earbuds, they note on their website that this is not your hi-fi, nice, expensive earbuds. These are definitely your cheap, crappy knockoff ones. But as with everything, so things are a little exaggerated, but they're definitely in the sound profile, and they present some of the mix problems that occur in that type of listening system and environment. So I think this is a really interesting plugin, and I'm going to have to play with it a little bit. Kind of want to maybe really look at the waveforms and do some different bounces and prints and see what we're looking at frequency-wise as far as the actual changes. I think this might be a really cool thing to check out and take a look at as far as finding ways that lets you prep for where your listeners are most likely going to hear your music. A demo available if you want to hear it on your system. And until then, have a great day. I'm Steven Ellisted with ADSR. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow on social media. Take care.